Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 150 of Let's Go Racing. Tyler Jones, Devin Logano here with you as we look back at the weekend that was from Nashville. A wild 5 overtime race where Joey Logano came out victorious for the first time this year, securing a spot in the NASCAR playoffs. We will react to that. Also look ahead to this weekend's race at Chicago, the Chicago Street Race, and plenty of good discussion to talk about that coming up in just a little while from right now. We'll have our news and notes with a look at the top headline in the sports. We'll have our mailbag segment at the end of today's show. But before we get to any of that, Dom, we need to take a minute to reminisce as we have been here for 150 episodes now. Who would have thought, Dom? Look at us.
Man, 3.5 years is really, really flown by, but at the same time, it feels like it has, I don't know, it's just so weird. Like, it feels like I've been doing the show with you guys, and it feels like it's been 2 minutes underwater, and feels like it's been not that long, man. That was a bad joke. I don't know if you caught that, but no, 150 episodes. We've had a lot of great guests. We've had a lot of great people, great partners, great live shows, great, awesome opportunities, and have met some lifelong friends doing this show, and so many cool things doing this. I mean, I think of all the people that have been involved, and Tyler, I'll miss somebody, but some of the partners too, including Whataburger, Ticket Smarter, Ollie Pop Soda. We've had some really good supporters, T-Top Manufacturing as well. A lot of great companies, but of course the people too that help drive the show and the guests. And man, we've done some really cool stuff. And David's been really, really a big part of it too. And I know he hasn't been here in the last few episodes, but like we said last week with the inside baseball stuff, I mean, he's staying busy with the racing school, and he's still here helping us in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes it's on air, sometimes it's off air, but I know David's proud of that too, Tyler. Not many podcasts make it this far. I remember reading that the 50% of podcasts don't make it to a 13th episode, and 75% of podcasts don't make it to about a 50 episode mark. Well, we've way surpassed that. So safe to say, Tyler, we're in the upper echelon of podcasts.
Yes. We have made it this far. It's been a lot of fun doing this show with you and with David and all our great guests that we've had over the years as well. And we can't get enough of it. We do this show, Dom, at the end of the day because we enjoy being around each other and we enjoy talking about motorsports, in particular NASCAR. And, I'll say this too. This sport has given a lot back to us. I cover other sports. I cover the NFL, college football, college basketball, in my other jobs. But it all circles back. We always come home to the sport of NASCAR, the sport that we love. I know that the sanctioning body frustrates us with some of their decisions from time to time, but at the end of the day, I would say that the sport's in a good spot and is a healthy product, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Oh, absolutely. The show, the sport, there's a lot in the industry going on. And this show, another 150 episodes, we get to episode 300, that'll be about 2027. So a lot's changed in the last 3.5 years for all three of us. Curious to see how that'll look down the road, but certainly some good hands we're all in with it.
Definitely so. Dom, let's start with what we saw this past Sunday at Nashville. I was there, and what a just wild race this was. A long day, not just 5 overtimes, but you also had an hour-and-a-half rain delay as well. And what transpired, it was something else, right? I mean, Denny Hamlin had this race won. I was actually a little surprised listening to him after the race that he wasn't too upset because the hooligans behind him cost him that race. He should have been the winner. And I'm of the belief, Dom, not just in NASCAR, but in all sports, just because an event goes to overtime does not mean that it was a classic or a great event by any means. 5 overtimes, but most were unnecessary. And, the proper outcome would have been a Denny Hamlin win, but with the guys behind him keep causing cautions and running out of gas, and eventually he ran out of gas. That cost him his chance for winning, and Joey Logano gets it done. I mean, did he deserve to win? I'll be honest, probably not. But at the end of the day, you still got to finish the job, and he found a way to finish the job. With that said, I think we have to ask this question: is the overtime rule, is it too extreme of this unlimited overtime amounts? I know it's very rare that we get a 5 overtime race like this. I don't know the record, but it's got to be close to a record for overtime attempts in a cup race. But I still think that the unlimited overtimes does more good than it does bad. Maybe it didn't look that way on Sunday, but I still think that it is something that we need to discuss, evaluate the future of this idea going forward. What say you? What's your thoughts on the way things shook out, and how NASCAR should treat overtime going forward?
So let's back that up a little bit of a historical context, and I'll give my answer to that. So NASCAR has been doing overtime since 2004 as a way to give fans, they feel, not only to the scheduled distance of a race, but to be able to give fans that are in attendance or the people watching at home the opportunity to have that race finish under green flag conditions. Because recall, there was a time where races were the scheduled distance. If there was a caution within 4 or 3 laps of the race, they would try to get the track cleaned up, make 2 lap, 1 lap restarts, but that was never guaranteed. The overtime, and I believe they were called green white checkers in the initial part of it. And they're still called that to some degree too, but NASCAR overtime is the formal term. That's where that came in 2004. And NASCAR experimented by having unlimited overtime opportunities in other series, like the Truck Series, I believe the Xfinity Series, but Cup had just 1 attempt. And then they played around with the idea of doing 3 attempts. And I believe in 2019 is when we moved to the current system where it's unlimited overtime attempts. And I want to say, Tyler, there was at one point where it was just 1 overtime attempt at super speedway races, but that changed over the years too. And correct me if I'm wrong, or if maybe there's somebody watching or listening that would know at least off the top of their head. I think the Kevin Harvick incident at Talladega in 2015 with the 1 overtime and Harvick allegedly causing a caution and saving his race and championship possible run made NASCAR change that decision. So it might even be 2016 where we got this unlimited overtime amount attempt. And I feel like that takes pressure off the teams, the drivers. Oh gosh, there's only 1 overtime. No, you got unlimited attempts. And NASCAR did not change this. You can recall too, where we had, I believe it was a couple of overtime attempts in 2020 at the Daytona 500, where we did see that spectacular crash and Ryan Newman survived. But NASCAR did not change after that situation. That was 4 years ago. So I got to imagine NASCAR, and again, outsider looking in, Tyler, probably enjoys these because it makes great TV, makes great entertainment. You can call it artificial excitement, you can call it excitement or whatever. NASCAR likes these. And I don't think we're going to see any change anytime soon.
I don't think so either. I know that they've toyed with it a lot over the years. You know that you had the what was the overtime line for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We know that they had the Geico restart zone and all that stuff. I mean, they've toyed with this overtime format for quite some time. I think it does more good than bad most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
but this was kind of an exception to the rule. Even then, as I sit here and I say that Denny Hamlin was robbed of that race, still put together an exciting finish. I mean, like, even as I sit here and complain that the right man did not win this race, it wasn't like that it wasn't exciting. Like, at the end of the day, for better or for worse, NASCAR's number one job is to be an entertainment product, is to entertain. And whether you liked it or not, whether you believe Denny Hamlin should have won that race or not, you can't help but, at the very least, John Newby, friend of the show, he and I were talking, you can't help but at least laugh. It was entertaining, maybe for the wrong reasons, but it still was exciting.
Sure, made great TV. It's great entertainment. That race went 10% more than the scheduled distance, the extra 31 laps running that race. But NASCAR loves this. It's great. It's great for ratings. It's great for the entertainment aspect of it. And like I said, I feel like you can look on one side of the coin and say it's an artificial excitement. On the other hand, this is how the race played out. Personally, I thought it was entertaining. And I'm probably in the minority here, Tyler, but I do enjoy the overtimes. I feel like, yeah, maybe the crashes aren't great and it sucks to see all these cars get torn up, but there's still excitement to it. And I enjoy seeing these overtimes. Maybe 5 was like a little like, whoa, that was crazy. I think the record, Tyler, was 6 in that NASCAR Xfinity Daytona race in 2018. But in Cup, this was the record, at least as of right now, the taping of the show. Nashville 2024 holds the record for the most overtimes. They are surely entertaining for better or for worse.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something else. And Joey Logano, let's talk about him. Get that win. You know, did he deserve to win? Probably not, but exciting finish and right time, his first win of the year. We've seen Ford improve. We've seen Penske really step up. It may not have been the prettiest win per se, but this was big for Joey Logano to get that monkey off his back to secure that playoff spot and get into victory lane. I would think that even though it wasn't a dominant performance by any stretch, that this was still a breakthrough for that 22 team, that they're going to be back in victory lane more after this.
Well, even bigger picture too. It's been a great, what, 6, 7 weeks for Team Penske. It's been the summer of Penske, if you will, with all three of the Cup guys winning, and in some way, shape, or form in the Cup Series. Of course, Logano won the All-Star race, and we know that that can provide momentum. And a win like this, where you punch that playoff position, absolutely. And the Indianapolis 500, the organization's got to be on that natural high right now, I would imagine. And when you look from the historical context of it too, the last time Joey Logano had a winless season where he did not win a points awarding race, you have to go all the way back to 2011, Tyler. It's a long time ago. 2011, think about where we were all at in 2011. We're talking about 3.5 years. That's 12 years ago. He now has the longest streak in the Cup Series of posting a win at least once a year that is active. Now, of course, Kyle Busch dates back to 2005, but he hasn't won yet this year. So Logano continuing that, continuing the historical trend, being a past champion, certainly adds to that. He's won every year he's been with Team Penske, and that was in 2013 when he joined the organization. He's tied for 27th now on the NASCAR all-time wins list. That ties him with the great NASCAR Hall of Famer, Fireball Roberts. So getting that upper echelon there too. Truex is ahead, Kurt Busch, Brad Keselowski, 36, 34 wins. So really good historical context on all that too. But really, like when you look at that too, 13 seasons of at least one victory, what a heck of a streak to have. And to think too that you are leading the NASCAR Cup Series active drivers on that too. You're up there for a reason. Joey Logano has been consistent year in and year out. Maybe it hasn't been the year they're looking for, but a win changes a lot of things, and a win can erase a lot of bad.
Yeah, I think so. I think that win was certainly needed for that 22 team. And you look at Ryan Blaney getting a win a couple weeks ago, Austin Cindric getting a win a couple weeks ago as well. This has been a nice stretch for Penske South Racing here over the last few weeks.
Oh, certainly has, certainly has. And you got to imagine too that Roger Penske is happy with the organization, and that organization, they run like Hendrick. They're not going to keep you if you're not going to win races. And everybody in that organization is winning right now. And all three Penske drivers, barring a 17th winner, which could happen, we did see in 2022, all of the cars are going to make the playoffs. It's looking really good. And Team Penske's heating up at the right time. Got to think this gives the entire organization some good momentum.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a big deal for Penske to have all three cars in the playoff as far as that goes. And think too, like Joey Logano has the most championships of those three drivers, and he's the one that took the longest to clinch a playoff spot to get to victory lane this year. I I think, Dom, that actually speaks to the strength of Penske, that the other guys could get into victory lane, because it wasn't a matter of if Joey Logano was going to win this year. It was a matter of when. And for Blaney and for Cindric to get their wins first, to me, that shows you how strong they are.
Oh, absolutely. The whole organization, and a lot of times too with racing, we know it's right time, right place. Think of Austin Cindric's win a few weeks ago, running second, ran a great race at Gateway. Who was he leading? Who did he pass on that last lap? None other than his teammate Ryan Blaney. That Team Penske organization has really turned it up over the last few weeks. And we know they have speed, Tyler. Logano had 3 poles entering Iowa. We know that they have good Q trim. We know that Paul Wood is not afraid to throw out some different strategies. Think about it like this. That 2-tire pit stop that Logano was last on pit road, they didn't change the left side of the tires. Jeff Gluck, friend of the show, was the one to point it out on X. And mind-boggling when you think about it, that Joey Logano ran more than half of that race on left side tires. And that that's just mind-boggling to me because you're always hearing about teams having 8 to 12 sets of tires typically on a Cup Series race weekend. So not only is the team firing on all cylinders, but the team strategies and the crew chiefs and it certainly is a team effort. Sounds very cliche, but Team Penske is just looking so good right now.
Yeah, yeah, they're doing a really good job. With that said, let me ask you one more question on this, and before we kind of move on here, of the three Penske teams, if I know you're a betting man, if I said, Dom, you can place a wager on any of these three to win the championship, who is, do you believe, not necessarily right now, but going forward, which of those three is going to be the strongest team, the best championship contender?
Well, if you were to place a bet on that, and I don't necessarily endorse or condone any kind of gambling, Tyler, but if I'm going to bet, or I were telling somebody, you might want to look at least give it a second thought, you got to think past championship experience gives a driver some sort of edge over drivers that haven't done it. Like look at Ryan Blaney, for example. Maybe the eighth to 10th place, arguably best car all year last year, but got hot at the right time. Joey Logano did that in his championship run in 22 as well. Let's be honest, Joey Logano was not the best car in 2022, nor in 2018. But especially as you look at this next gen era of race cars and the parity that it offers. Now, Austin Cindric has been to the playoffs. That team did have all this time to prep, and I believe it was still a first round exit, but you got to imagine he's going to put up a bigger fight in that playoff race and maybe not be eliminated. But I feel like you got to lean on that experience. And these guys have nerves of steel. They've been here before. They know what they're doing. You got to imagine it would be a Blaney or a Logano to make it to that championship four. It wouldn't surprise me to see either of them make the championship four. And I got to think Joey Logano would be the guy right now. And maybe looking in too much of the numbers too. But Tyler, in this format where we've had the championship four and eliminations into the playoffs, every even year that we have had this playoff system, Joey Logano has been a part of the championship four. 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. Does that continue in 24? Got to think maybe the numbers, but more importantly, the momentum would be on the 22 team side.
Last note on Nashville. Second straight year was the sellout. Most of the crowd stayed through the rain delay and all. Atmosphere was great. I was around the city the whole weekend, and everybody was talking about NASCAR everywhere you went. It was the talk of the town. I think this is one of the best moves. I've said this before. I'll say it again, that NASCAR and what was Dover Motorsports Group, now, of course, they got bought by SMI, has made of putting a race in Nashville. I know it's three races in the state of Tennessee, and Bristol's not terribly far from Nashville, but this was a home run. I think that this is going to stay on the schedule for quite some time. I don't think Nashville's getting a second race, but I think having that summer race there from Nashville, all the excitement. Nashville is, my favorite city, and it's a great summer city. I know that they've had some bad luck with rain a little bit the last couple of years, but I don't see this race leaving the schedule or the summertime specifically anytime soon, Dom.
No, I would have to agree with you. Like you said it best on the show last week, that this event has become a destination event. It's not just the race on Sunday and Saturday and the triple header. It's all the environment around the city.
It's become a marquee event of the NASCAR schedule.
I would absolutely agree. I don't know if I would call it a crown jewel race, but I would say a top 10 and definitely one of the races that is more sought after and more that you hear people traveling to go to this race weekend. And I know you go and cover it every year. And like for you, what stuck out the most? You go to this race weekend, and I know you've been a few times. Was there anything maybe different this time around that you saw for the first time, or just really stood out compared to the other times you've been?
Well, I've seen this every time, but for me, the thing that sticks out is it hasn't gone away. That, a lot of times we do these races and, it's big for the first event, but then it kind of fades into the distance. I think Kentucky's a great example of that. Kentucky was a shell of its former self by the time it was done compared to that first race. The excitement and the energy surrounding Nashville is just as big now as it was the very first race. And the stars, Nashville's biggest stars in country music and such, are there. Luke Combs drove the pace car. He sponsored Bubba Wallace. He had his whole new album on a race car. Hardy gave the command. Saw Riley Gaines out there, who's been big in the movement to prevent transgender men from competing in women's sports and has a huge following. She was out there. countless others as well. I've talked to some sponsor people that make a point like that race teams can sell for more money than some of the other races because that's a heavily sought after rising market that these sponsors these teams can make more money off that race compared to I don't know, name a small market race like Martinsville or something. I mean, this race is a win-win for everybody involved.
And I got to imagine too, any given race week and bigger races are going to have more people, but you have about 100, 125 credentialed media members. How did that look this week? Give us that little inside baseball track.
In the media center, every seat was full.
Wow.
And even taking a step further, they couldn't fit everybody in. They had an overflow section in the dining area where some people had to set up. They had to bring out some extra extension cords and such for people to set up in the dining area. And uh it was just packed. I mean, it was something like I have not seen too many places. I mean, and I was so impressed. I was happy for the fans that they stuck it out through the rain. I mean, yet there was lightning in the area. People had to take shelter and everything. If people left, I would not have blamed them because we didn't know when the race was going to resume. We knew it was going to resume because they didn't reach halfway, but we didn't know when. And pretty much almost everybody stayed. Like that that was that's the type of event that we need more of in NASCAR is finding ways. Maybe it's new markets, maybe it's great travel destination, whatever it may be. We need to find a way to create more marquee events, and that's what Nashville has become, and that's what Chicago's become, which leads us into our next topic here, looking into the Chicago Street Race. Dom, I was at this race last year. I'll say it because I like to run a victory lap every time I mention this. Dom was very skeptical about the Chicago Street Race last year and thought it was going to be a failure, that it was a bad idea. And even with the rain and everything that transpired, it was an exciting race. It was a great event. We heard politicians against it and everything, and now they're all on board, and the city of Chicago's embracing it. The ratings for last year's race were incredible. I would be surprised if they were as good this year just because you've lost the novelty of it. But nonetheless, Dom, here we have another destination new race on the schedule. I have no reason to think that Chicago's not going to be exciting this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. Another momentous race with another momentous race. I just got to say here real quick too, Tyler, what is it about you, man? You pick like the most historical races or races that are going to have like stuff in history books 20, 30 years from now. You tend to go cover. What is it about that? Chicago.
Kansas, the closest finish ever. 5 overtimes at Nashville. I'm not going to be at Chicago this weekend, but I did see SVG become the first driver in what was it, 60 plus years to win in his first career start. So yes, I have a good track record here.
There you go. Yeah, maybe that could, yeah, I don't know if that's going to continue now because you're not there. But no, the Chicago Street Race, and I don't think there's the option to pick up the third year after this event. And it just seems like everybody has warmed up to the idea of having this street race there in Chicago. The
Even
local,
Dominic.
even Dominic, the local economic impact to the area, even Dominic. No, I wasn't necessarily against it. I was skeptical. And it seemed like, Tyler, a lot of the news articles we read that even it seemed like the city of Chicago was thinking or seeing how they could potentially even back out of it before it even happened. But it's really cool to see that this event is going to happen this weekend. And I'm really curious to see how SVG, we'll talk more about picks here coming up, but how SVG handles that, the pressure being the defending race winner. And just we have a full field in the Cup Series. We have 40 cars. We haven't had that in a few weeks. And then we have cars that will be going home on the Xfinity side.
Yeah. You hate to see that, but it's also a good sign, though, that you're getting enough cars out there. So the good with the bad. When it comes to the Chicago Street Race, we mentioned that last year was a success, even with everything that went on of the rain and they had to push back the start and they had to cut the ending off because of sunlight. They didn't have lights, that they needed and all that. And the music around it, there was only one musical act that got to perform because of all the rain and everything. This feels like a reset button of sorts, Dom, that Chicago's getting like a do-over, if you will, like a second shot at their first race. Because even though I had a great time and it was a great race and everything, we didn't get the full Chicago experience of what was planned out for this, and now we're going to get it here this weekend.
Absolutely. I think you could even speak more on this. The Chainsmokers concert, that was the big marquee headline Saturday night that had to get postponed or I guess canceled because of the weather.
Canceled.
But yeah, and looking at the forecast too, I know the forecast changes overnight and they're superstitious people, but it looks promising. It looks very good for this weekend with partly cloudy skies. There's rain on Friday expected, but it looks like it's going to be sunny on Sunday and a great reset opportunity, a great second chance to really get this race in. And I even look at the drivers too, Tyler. I mean, look at who's entered on the Cup Series. We'll start there. AJ Allmendinger, of course, colleague racing, the 13 car that they enter in select races. He's better on his part-time schedule when he is when full-time Cup AJ is not good. Part-time AJ is really, really good. He knocks off top 10 finishes. He's kind of like Matt Flynn. I think you'd appreciate that one, Tyler. But
Okay.
I think, yeah, Allmendinger makes noise potentially this weekend in that 13 car. He did finish top 10 in that 13 car, I believe at Coda. So we'll see on that. Kesgral in the 15, SVG in the 16, of course. Not driving for Trackhouse, but in that colleague entry, got to imagine Trackhouse, of course, will have its hand in helping him as any way they can. Austin Hill in those select entries with the number 33 car. Joey Hand, who ran some races, sports car racer, ran with Rick Ware in 2022 at some select road course races, is running the RFK 60 vehicle. So you know that's going to be a fast ride. And Josh Bilicki, the number 66 with MBM Motorsports. So we have a full field. But of all those names, who sticks out to you the most? I mean, besides SVG, let me rephrase that. Who sticks out to you
Well,
the most?
one guy I wish was running. If it wasn't for SVG, this guy could have won last year. Jensen Button. Where's he at? Where's he at? Does he have some F1 TV obligations? There an F1 race this weekend or something? I know he does the Sky Sports stuff. I would have liked to seen him give this a shot. I also want to see Taylor,
Jordan Taylor.
the sports car driver. Where's he been? Like, I thought he did very well, all things considered, at Austin for Chase Elliott a couple of years last year. I'd like to see him run this. I think it'd be great to see. He's still involved in the Hendrick organization and everything.
Mhm.
But even with that said, I think, AJ's got a really good shot. I think that, besides SVG, he's kind of the name to watch. He's a threat at every one of these road courses, and he came very close to getting to victory lane this year on the road courses and the Cup side. But SVG, you mentioned the pressure. He has been so good in Xfinity this year. And not just on road courses. He's done pretty well on ovals too. Hasn't won on an oval yet, but already has 2 wins in the Xfinity side. I think there's a chance here for SVG to make a statement like, Dom, think about this. Hear me out on this. I'll say this right now. If SVG wins this weekend, I think he guarantee, as Charles Barkley would say, a ride in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. I think it's kind of on the fence because it's depending on how many charters Trackhouse is going to have. And then, obviously they have multiple development drivers. We saw a really good run this past week in the 77 car, the Spire car from, help me out, name's escaping me, this
Zane
past week.
Smith?
From Zane Smith, thank you.
Mhm.
From Zane Smith, and they got to figure out, Zane Smith isn't going to be back in that 77 car next year because they're bringing in Michael McDowell. So, they have some decisions to make, and it sounds like Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain are both back. It is with how well SVG is doing in Xfinity, and if he can win this race, then he demonstrates, like, look, you put me in a Cup car next year, I'm probably going to win a road course race, and we're going to be in the playoffs. And he's not a spring chicken either. He's 35 years old. I guarantee that if SVG wins this weekend, or at any point for that matter in the Cup Series, he will be full-time in Cup for Trackhouse Racing next year.
How can you not put him full time in a Cup car? I know Justin Marks is doing it right. They're doing this program with different select starts at different places and really
Oh yeah, they
building
made
up
the
the
right
repertoire.
call with how they handled this
Oh,
year, not
definitely.
throwing for the Wolves
Definitely.
in Cup.
But I agree with you. You win, you go back to back in this race. Yeah, it's the same track from last year, but how do you not get fast tracked to the Cup Series? You've won. You made sure that it's not a fluke. Tyler, even if he doesn't win, if he goes out and leads the most laps or runs up front, and there's something out of his doing that takes him out of contention to win, all that TV time, all the turning of the heads, I think. Let's be honest here too. A lot of fans don't tune in for Xfinity and NASCAR trucks. We know there's diehards. There's a lot of diehard fans that watch any kind of NASCAR race, but there's a lot of people that just exclusively watch Cup, and they've only seen him in 3 or 4 starts. He goes back out there at the street course and backs up what he did last year. It's hard to argue. How do you not put a winner? How do you not put a winner in a Cup car back-to-back years, full time in 2025? You could certainly make a strong argument for it.
Well, and let's look at that camp for a moment. There at Trackhouse Race. So we assume Suarez and Chastain are back. Both guys have run so well, and Suarez already clinched a playoff spot and all that, right? Um, let's say they buy a third charter, okay? Then you have a choice. Do you go with Zane Smith or SVG? And I know Zane Smith finished second this week, and that was awesome. Best run he's had of his whole season. But if we're going to be honest here, Zane Smith had been struggling up until this past week. Zane Smith, remember, he didn't ever run an Xfinity. He went straight from truck to Cup. I still think there's a learning curve for Zane Smith. Maybe I know that Front Row has talked about buying multiple charters, that Spire, rather, is talked about, buying another charter potentially or whatever it may be. Maybe he stays in Spire, but not with the 77. Maybe it's their partnership with Colleague where he runs for Colleague. But if it comes down to a choice between SVG and Zane Smith right now, I don't see how you could pick Zane Smith over SVG for a Cup ride next year.
And to defend that, I guess, or maybe play a little bit of devil's advocate or other side of the coin too. I feel like I remember hearing this, and I don't have the source on it, so feel free to criticize me in the comments below. But last year, let's take a look at that car historically, or these other cars that Spire has done. They are certainly building a great program here, and we know you don't build a great wall of China overnight. It's going to take years. But Ty Dillon, I remember hearing that team used a lot of experimental parts, the 77 car. Who's not to say we're seeing that with Zane Smith and more experimental parts, or kind of like an R&D car, if you will, because we don't have testing. We don't have testing every week. We don't have teams to be able to do that. So maybe Zane Smith, because he is on the loaner from Trackhouse Racing, maybe he's getting the stuff that's, I don't want to say questionable, Tyler, but maybe there's more R&D going on, and they're throwing more at the 71 because they feel Zane can handle it. And I'm not saying the others can't handle it, but maybe that 71 is that lowest priority for the team.
Yeah, and what I would counter to that though is like Trackhouse, their approach, and I would say this with SVG and the Xfinity side, even though he's running for Colleague, they are treating them as if they're Trackhouse drivers. Unless you knew what they were driving, if you looked at their fire suit or something, you would think that they were full-time Trackhouse guys. Zane Smith, for example, he's got the Trackhouse on his fire suit. His PR people, a little shout out here, Peyton Reynolds. She and I went to college together at Kansas. She works for Trackhouse, and she is Zane Smith's PR rep, representing Trackhouse, even though he's with Spire. Everything is Trackhouse, despite that. I think they're using Trackhouse pit crews for that team as well. But that doesn't mean that everything is going smoothly for Zane Smith. I think Zane Smith is a very talented race car driver, and I think he's got a bright future. But given the choice, SVG at this moment is more ready than Zane Smith is.
I think so. I'd have to agree with that at this point in juncture. I think the only thing that would really, and again, to counter that too with SVG, the age difference. I believe Zane Smith is 23 or 24. He's won a truck championship. SVG's 34, 35. So he's got that. He's going to have less time in theory in that ride, in that role. And I feel like when you look at it from a purely business standpoint, you're going to want to maximize your time you have with somebody.
One more note that I think is a very interesting nugget. And I don't think anyone's reported on this out there. Maybe somebody has and I missed it. And if I did, I'm not trying to steal something from you. But I noticed just before the race, I saw SVG and he was walking around the pits. Obviously, he didn't run last week, but he was still in attendance. And there were several Red Bull people around with him. Remember, Red Bull left the sport years ago. They used to own a team and everything. And they were a long time supporter of his there when he ran supercars. And I think he still has the Red Bull helmet that he wears and such.
Mhm.
Maybe there's some potential funding, whether it's Red Bull or somebody else, that SVG can bring to the table with him too.
You can bring some Red Bull money, you're going to get anybody talking. So SVG could, in theory, write that check to any organization if that is in fact true. But I feel like that's right too, Tyler. I remember that win last year at the street race that they had the Red Bull helmet, and I've seen him with that. So there's something there, and you, as David would say, you call that, Tyler, you call that leverage.
Yeah. So Jonesy Scoops giving you the insights
There
there
you
from Nashville with my observations. Let's get to the news and notes, the headlines going on across the sport this week. Dom, where do you want to start?
We'll start with a follow-up from last week when we were talking about the silly season where that picture falls in 2025. It looks like Josh Berry, Wood Brothers, maybe a step closer to happening than we were talking about last week. So Josh Berry, according to our buddy, our friend of the show, Adam Stern at the Sports Business Journal, Josh Berry is potentially nearing a deal to drive for the Wood Brothers. And at the time of this taping, Wood Brothers has a press conference scheduled for Wednesday. So the news may already be out on who their driver is, but all signs pointing at this point now, Tyler, to Josh Berry taking the wheel of the 21. Harrison Burton has been driving that car since 2022. The team last scored a victory in 2017 with Ryan Blaney, and before that with Trevor Bayne in the 2011 Daytona 500. Tyler, certainly one of the oldest organizations, one of the most storied organizations that has had plenty of great drivers over the years, including Michael Waltrip, Morgan Shepherd, David Pearson, you name it. A lot of great drivers. Team has never won a championship, and they are on the cusp of win number 100. 99 wins as an organization. Potentially, if Josh Berry's named, who's not to say, competing for that 100th win if Harrison Burton can't get it done.
And we mentioned with Trackhouse still operating, even with their drivers running for other teams. This has been the de facto number 4 team of Penske for a long time now. And you're going to have all of Penske's resources just under the Wood Brothers umbrella. And we've seen prior to Harrison Burton, this team run really well. Matt DiBenedetto made the playoffs with them. We saw Ryan Blaney take that car to victory lane and make the playoffs and run really well there. Everything is lined up for that 21 car, and they have Ford Motorcraft funding behind them. And if you got Roger Penske in your corner, then that's a good sign too. I think Josh Berry is a terrific young talent. He's run very well this season. Came close to victory a couple weeks ago. Josh Berry will get this team back up to the standard that they would hope for. I would think that Josh Berry can contend for wins and contend for the playoffs and everything right there in that 21 car. And Rodney Childers is one of the best crew chiefs in the business. I think that's a very good combination coming together and sticking within the Ford family too. They a year under their belts running Ford with Josh Berry, I think it would be a very easy transition, easier than people think, I think, going to that 21 car.
It would make a lot of sense for that to happen. And I feel like Josh Berry has options, but it seems like this Wood Brothers option is probably most likely going to happen. And like you said, to keep it in the Ford camp. I know Rodney Childers wants to be a package deal. I know there's factors that don't always allow something like that. Who's not to say maybe he stays at the Stewart or the Haas factory team rather. But imagine a duo like that, Rodney Childers with the resources Team Penske has and Josh Berry behind the wheel. I feel like that's a great pairing and wins and competing for championships waiting to happen.
Josh Berry too. He is one of the best stories this sport has seen in recent memory. That, hey, hard work pays off, right? With grinding for so long in late models and taking advantage of the opportunity he got in Xfinity with Junior Motorsports. And then, getting the ride at Stewart Haas, they didn't have any sponsorship guaranteed. And Tony Stewart took a chance on him, and he's run very well this year. And then, we saw him in the fill-in duties for Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman last year and did a really good job with that. We've seen David on this show get emotional talking about Josh Berry. I love what Josh Berry stands for. It was his home race this past week in Nashville. He and Joseph Newgarden were talking back and forth. They both went to high school together. Taylor Swift also went to high school with him too, there in Nashville. And Joseph was kind of emotional talking about Josh Berry. I mean, this guy is not there because of he doesn't bring a dime to the table. He's there because of his hard work and talent. And I wish this sport had more Josh Berry types. He's good for NASCAR, and I wish him nothing but the best.
Who can't get behind a guy that was working a 9 to 5 and racing on the side to try and make it? And I think that speaks to anybody that wants to work hard and put in that effort. Because people can talk all day about the dreams that they want to do. And you know me, Tyler, I'll be your biggest supporter. But you also have to put the work in too. And Josh Berry's a great example of that. I think he worked as a bank teller for years before he got that opportunity to continue racing late models and really try his hand at making a career out of it. And it's really cool to see how far he has come this short amount of time and making it in his 30s. You don't see that often anymore. That was the gold bar in the 80s where you had drivers making their big cup break when they were in their middle to younger 30s. And now you're signed at 15 or 16 or you're used goods by that point. Josh Berry, SVG, different pathways, but it shows that you can still make that dream happen. You don't have to be signed at 15 years old.
One more note on Josh Berry, too. I think those three Penske drivers are pretty well set in stone. Cindric, Blaney, and Logano aren't going anywhere unless you all know something I don't anytime soon. For the 21 team and for Penske both, this provides some stability of sorts. I think Josh Berry, barring something that I don't know, Josh Berry could be in that car for 5+ years, I think, there. And you know, the Wood Brothers has been this kind of, AAA affiliate, if you will, of drivers promoting up to Penske and getting their opportunities. Remember, Austin Cindric was supposed to do that before Keselowski left and everything. To me, this is a win for all parties. If you're the Wood Brothers, I think you're grateful to have Josh Berry in that ride. The only way that he's not going to be there a long time is if he leaves for a better ride down the road. But if the Wood Brothers can rally, if they can put their money behind and give him great equipment, then I think you're looking at this combination being together for a while.
You think about it, Tyler, and I'm only going off recent memory, but when is the last time that the Wood Brothers had one driver over 4 years? And you think about it, even the part-time days, it didn't happen. Blaney was there for just 2 years. Trevor Bayne, 4 years, but they were all part-time years. Paul Menard, 2 years. Matt DiBenedetto, 2 years. Harrison Burton looking like it's going to be 3 years. And Ken Schrader, 1.5 years. All these fill-in guys. Ricky Rudd, 3 years. Not a lot of longevity in that 21 car. Maybe Josh Berry could buck that trend.
Maybe. And he might leave for a better ride down the line, but the Wood Brothers, I think, are in a position where they got a golden opportunity in front of them to give their driver top equipment and to compete for championships potentially down the road. I think that's realistic here. What else are you going?
So let's look at the odds for this NASCAR race weekend with the Grant Echo Park 165 at Chicago. I got to start by saying this. Last year, Tyler, a lot of sports books had SVG lumped in as the field and just lumped in with drivers towards the back at 20-1. You had to guess. What do you think SVG's odds are per the Caesar Sportsbook?
I'll go plus 800.
You're close, about plus 600, 6-1 SVG
Okay.
sitting there, as well as Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, Martin Truex Jr. sitting about that 6-1 range. William Byron sitting at about 10-1. This one shocks me, Tyler. Ross Chastain, who is a proven road/street course winner, we'll call it road course winner because he won at COTA a couple of years ago, 30-1. Potential undervalued pick there. Alex Bowman also sitting at about the same odds. Joey Logano, Denny Hamlin, a lot of long shots. Bubba Wallace sitting at 1,000-1.
Okay. Bubba's not great at road courses. I'm not surprised. My pick this week, I'm high on him. He has had a very good year. I think that SVG gets it done, goes back to back at the Chicago street course, locks up a ride in the Cup Series next year. And we've seen what he can do in a Cup car and getting around this street course. I think one thing, too, Dom, as well, these guys still don't have a ton of experience on street course racing. Like, you know, yes, the entire field ran this race last year, but there wasn't a whole lot of practice. The race was shortened. SVG still has a significant advantage on almost everybody.
Certainly, certainly. And I feel like to that lens, pun intended, it's hand to Joey Hand in that 60 car. We get to really see what this guy who runs sports cars for a living, to really see what he can do in really good equipment. No knock on Rick Ware Racing, but you have RFK building your cars. Chris Buescher runs really well on the road courses. I feel like one of those guys is going to be really, really well too. But you can't look past SVG. I feel like when that checkered flag falls on Sunday, SVG would have been a factor in that race, if not already a victory lane. So I know you're picking SVG. I got to go against that. I feel like it will come from a camp similar to that, but it comes from Chevy. Recall he was leading the race before everything shifted and everything just changed, sitting at 30-1, still needing a win in 2024. Kyle Busch, an accomplished
Ooh.
road course race winner, gets it done at the street course and redeems himself for that late race caution in 2023. Kyle Busch wins on Sunday.
And he keeps the streak alive of years in a row with a win. So
20 if he can do it. He has the NASCAR record at 19, holds that over Richard Petty and over anybody else. But to 20 years, I don't know if anybody else can touch that. Maybe Logano, but yeah, Kyle Busch gets it done on Sunday.
yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun. Certainly looking forward to that. Dom, are we ready for the mailbag segment now?
We're ready for the mailbag segment. It's been fun doing this the last few weeks. I'm curious on what's in that mailbag this week.
All right. So my question for you this week, you can submit questions to us, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com, Star Podcast on X, also on Facebook as well. My question for you, Dom, we you and I both watched the presidential debate this past week. We're not going to dive into that. We don't discuss politics here. There's other shows for that. But I want to know if you could pick anybody in the world and pick the topic or multiple topics, whatever it would be, who would you love to debate one-on-one?
Who would I love? Oh, man, that's a great question. You stumped me, Tyler. Okay, let me circle back to you. I'm going to flip that, and I have a question for you. But given that topic, what would you pick? Who are you going against?
I would do a sports debate with Stephen A. Smith.
That's good.
Stephen A. is one of the best debaters. He's a master debater, in sports media, and he's very entertaining. He's not traditionally my cup of tea, but I would love to go toe to toe with Stephen A. And Stephen A. like he can talk sports, he can talk politics. I'd want to debate about everything and see if I can go toe to toe with Stephen A. and what type of nickname or insult he would throw at me and try to go back his way. I think Stephen A. would be the one I would debate.
Stephen, that is a good pick, man. I think by default, I'm just gonna have to piggyback off you and pick him for now. But maybe if I had to really think about it, maybe I'll have an answer next week with a better formulated answer. But I would have to pick like a sports guy, somebody is just well-rounded in their craft, like a Peyton Manning. Like debate him on something that like just would throw him off. Because he knows his football. He's a great entrepreneur, but maybe debate him on something where I feel like I could at least have a fighting chance and a playing field against. That's where my mind goes on that.
Yeah. The man, Peyton Manning, he knows football, obviously. He knows pizza. He loves Papa John's.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
He knows his
and
beer. He's an entrepreneur. He has all the Bud Light and Budweiser factories, or at least he has his hand on it. He knows what he's doing on a
yeah,
business standpoint too.
he also is involved in political circles too.
Mhm.
He's done like different speaking engagements for different Republican organizations over the years and such. Peyton Manning, a true Renaissance man. I would be intrigued to have a discussion with Peyton Manning. Maybe not even a debate, but just a discussion with Peyton Manning.
Yeah,
As far
have a beer with him at one of his facilities, one of his many facilities, and just get that personal tour and just pick the man's brain.
all right, what do you got for me this week?
So we were talking about some stuff on air, so it kind of made me think throughout the show too, like before we came on tonight. So we all change. People change over the years, and in the 3.5 years we've been doing this show, certainly we were talking about that last week. But take that even a step further, and what we were talking before we were on the show tonight was about some of our early days, elementary days. What are some of your, I guess, highlights when you were a kid, when you were, a minor, if you will, living at mom and dad's house, school age? What are maybe some stories or some piece of information that people would be surprised to hear about or maybe don't know about?
Um, let's see. So I lived in the state of Oregon at one point in my life, during my childhood. Grew up in Oklahoma. Most people know I'm from Oklahoma, but my family, we left for a period of time, went out to Oregon. My dad was working for a nonprofit then, and then moved back to finish high school there in Oklahoma. And I'll say this, as far as what people may be shocking in that sense, like my adult life, I've always lived in pretty populated cities. I mentioned, from the Tulsa area, decent sized city. Lived in Lawrence, Kansas, just outside of Kansas City, and was, in the KC area for quite some time. Was in Omaha, another decent sized city, for a bit. And now I've been in Dallas, the last 2.5 years. And, this is the, third largest metro in the U.S. There's more people, Dom, in DFW than there are the entire state of Oklahoma and the entire state of Arizona, and a lot of places out there. And it would be hard for me not to live in a city again. I've become too accustomed to it in my way of life, if you will. I enjoy the city life. But there was one point in time I lived in a small town, La Grande, Oregon, to be exact, that only had about 12,000 people. And I enjoyed it, and it was a big part of my childhood and whatnot. But yeah, I think that might surprise people that I lived in a small town in rural Oregon for a bit. Enjoyed it, but I could not do that again. I am a city guy. I have to continue to live in major cities. Hopefully, I stay in Dallas for a long time. But if I move elsewhere, probably a very slim chance I'm ever living in a small town again.
Sure, that makes sense, especially when you get accustomed to whether it be a small town or a big place. And you do that, you kind of just, I guess, adapt, if you will, and you learn things and you learn what you like and you don't like. I think that's anybody, but especially I could see that being hard to go back to a smaller town in that case too, because you're used to it. You're used to the amenities of what a city may have or what it's able to offer that maybe a small town can't.
Now, Dom, you lived in Albuquerque for a decent number of years, but you ended up moving back to the small town life of Grants, New Mexico. For those that don't know, what is it like living in rural New Mexico there?
Well, see, and I think too, kind of like what you were talking about, I guess maybe you get used to what you do. And I was born in Albuquerque, lived in Grants all through high school. I went to Catholic school for 10 years. So Grants is a very small town. To give you an idea, if you've
And you
never,
lived in Santa Fe for a while too.
and Santa Fe too, but to give you an idea, Grants and East Tennessee, but Grants is, again, perspective here. One public high school, one Walmart, and two exits off the interstate. That gives you an idea of how big this place is. You blink, you miss it. But I feel like small town life is really nice too, because I lived in Albuquerque for 6 years, lived in Santa Fe for a year, lived in, we'll call it 3 months in East Tennessee. Didn't work out there, but it was really cool to see different parts of the country. And I get the appeal on the city, all the amenities it can offer, and same with Santa Fe, but just it wasn't for me. And you guys know me. I'm big on family, and that was the big thing in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Didn't really have too much family in that part of the state, and Grants has been home, and I was always told as a kid too, there's more to life than Grants, and I'll never forget that lesson that my mom told me, Tyler. She said, you got to leave, you got to get out of your hometown, you got to see the world. There's different places out here. If whatever you do brings you back to Grants, great. But you are going to leave Grants, and you are going to see that there's other places besides this small town that we live in. And you don't appreciate that, I think, at least for me. I didn't appreciate that here and then as a kid. But then you look back on it, the experience going to school in Albuquerque, working in Albuquerque for 2 years, taking off to Tennessee, coming back to Grant, moving to Santa Fe, coming back to Grants. It really gives you good perspective. It is a good thing when they say mamas know best. They really, really do. And being able to see different parts of the world certainly, I think, shaped me to the person I am today. And I'm grateful for those experiences.
And we mentioned at the top of the show just how much we love NASCAR and what this sport has done for us. For both you and I, you've traveled the NASCAR circuit more than I have. this sport has allowed us to be able to see the world and venture out.
Oh, certainly, Tyler. I was telling somebody I'm very grateful for how things even transpired on that to starting a NASCAR news website to being able to cover the sport on a year-round basis and really traveling, especially in 2018, going all these places I'd never been. Tyler, I'll look back all these years later when none of this matters and I have all the memories to keep here up here and think of all the cool places and more importantly all the connections, all the people and all the lifelong friendships and people I've been able to be around because of this sport that made it possible. I was telling somebody the other day I've made it to like 33 or 34 states, mostly because of NASCAR. Had it not been because of the sport or not being involved in it, I wouldn't have traveled as much. Getting to step on the south lawn of the White House to go cover events there, to test sessions, different things. Very grateful. And if you told this small town kid from Grants, New Mexico, about half my life ago that this would happen, wouldn't have believed it.
So I've been to Grants, New Mexico, and very nice small town, very scenic, right there in the mountains and everything. I enjoyed Grants in my one visit out there. One day I do need to pay you another visit and go back to Grants. For people that don't know, what is Grants, New Mexico like?
That's a great question. It's a small town on the lip of Mount Taylor, not quite the Rocky Mountains, but pretty close, right off Interstate 40. And maybe you've driven through it on the way to the Dallas-Fort Worth or Oklahoma City area, or on the way to Las Vegas, LA, Phoenix. It's definitely a gas stop town, but I think too, it's what you make of it. And you have the mountains, you have great hiking in the area, you have great national parks not too far away, you have landmarks, you've got great things in the area. You've got, if you love golfing, I know you do, Tyler. I've gotten back into it. Great golfing here in the area. And we have a racetrack out in the next town over, Milan, New Mexico. And they have the Uranium Capital Speedway. There's a lot of cool stuff. I think it's what you make of it. And I think back to living in a small town, Tyler. I know you appreciate this because you follow politics and we talk politics too. And that quote from President JFK in the 60s of not ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country and what you make of your opportunities. And I feel like that's how it is in a small town. You hear a lot of people say, well, our town doesn't have this, or our town doesn't have this. There's nothing to do in Grants. Well, our community doesn't owe us anything. It's what we make of it. And that's the mentality I've tried to have living in Grants. And I was one of the few people that wanted to come back to Grants eventually and did make it back. So really awesome to be a part of my hometown and love it here. But I think that quote really sticks out to me is it's what you make of it. And you can have a bad attitude, you have a great attitude. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic perspective. Don, before we go, 4th of July coming up this weekend on Thursday and holiday weekend and everything. What's going on in your world?
Well, you'll be able to smell the freedom at the barbecue, or cookout, the cookout. Because I got to give Tyler Jones credit here, folks, for there is a distinction between a barbecue and a cookout. So I've had to change my verbiage on that, but if it's for the better, and I appreciate that. Barbecue's full on steaks and the sauces and everything. A cookout's with burgers and hot dogs, and we're having a cookout at our house on Thursday,
I'm
which I'm
glad that
excited.
you now accept that. There is a
Oh yeah,
difference.
it
You
was one of
cannot
those.
it
You know how
cannot be a barbecue unless there's barbecue.
I agree. And kind of one of those things where they say when you get the blinders turned on or you get the goggles or the glasses to be able to see better, that was one of those moments, kind of an eye-opening experience. But yeah, we're having a cookout for the 4th of July. And it's usually a really busy time with birthdays and anniversaries for our family around this time. It seems like we're at everybody's house one night out of the week this week. So it's going to be a lot of fun. How about for you in the summer of Jones? Where is the 4th of July Independence Day celebration taking you this year?
So I already had my 4th of July celebration in Nashville. Used my holiday for that, but still enjoying the weekend here in Dallas, getting together with some friends Thursday night and celebrating freedom and lighting fireworks and all that, and just gonna kind of keep low key, just enjoy a weekend at home here this week. So that'll be what I'm up to, and certainly looking forward to it. I love this country. We're the greatest country on earth. And one final note, I would say this, and this is a point that I'm going to say on this show and several other shows I do over the next week or so. Dom, this is not a political thing. I think that most people would agree with this with the statement I'm about to say right now. As we celebrate the 4th of July, folks, I would encourage you this week and every other week, buy American, drink American beer, support your local businesses. You know, we have a great country here. We have hardworking Americans that are going out every day and trying to provide a living for their families and take care of them. I think that one just appreciation that we can do this weekend and every week in particular is do what we can to support our neighbors and buy local and buy American to celebrate our freedom.
And I would even add on to that too, and I agree with you. I think to add on to that as well. And I love seeing when you go to the store, you go in public, you go see somebody, or you're going wherever, and you can tell somebody has served our country, whether it be whatever branch of military they are with their hat or a jacket or whatever, or even just a pin. However, they're showing they served our country, to thank them. And I've come to find out over the years, just even saying thank you for your service, even if you don't know the person, it goes a
Yep.
long way. And I challenge anybody to do that. And it's something I need to do better at doing more. But it is awesome to hear the stories that veterans have to tell, and the stories that they care to share, of course, because everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to share different experiences. But on top of buying American, to thank our veterans because of our independence.
That's exactly right. On that note, we'll put the checkered flag out in this edition of Let's Go Racing. Subscribe to the show. New episodes out each and every week. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, check out the Studio Soapbox Network, this show, The Jones Report, as well as the Coach Bodo's podcast as well on all podcast platforms. Check us out social media at Star Podcasts on X, on Facebook. Also, email davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. For Dominic Aragon and David Starr, Tyler Jones, thanks so long. It's been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.